Hello and welcome, Exiles, to my Sanctum Rusher. I'm going with Surfcaster, Penance Brand Anticipation, and I gotta be honest, this might just be faster and more efficient than the Energy Blade build. Not in terms of late game scaling, but in terms of how fast it gets to Sanctum and how fast it runs those Sanctums. I gotta be honest, I'm really impressed with this Ascendancy, and I think it's gonna feel real good for those people that choose to play this. Full disclosure, I myself am not starting this. I want to do a Val Cold Snap Architect of Chaos, but a lot of people asked me for a Sanctum Rush build, so I took the time yesterday on stream to put it together, and you could check the whole VOD for that if you're curious. Now let's get into things. With this video, we are going over leveling trees, with this POB. So I have a leveling tree where I personally thought Fire Trap felt pretty good to level up to level 31, and then at level 31, I am going to say, you have a little bit of a scuff tree where you start specking nodes that are for swapping over to Power Siphon. So we have a Power Siphon swap. And then we level with that all the way to around 69, 70-ish, which is just what these trees are, is us progressing some Power Siphon stuff and then respecking over to this tree here, which is set up for Penance Brand of Dissipation. Now, there are a few steps in this process. Step number one, when you're at this Fire Trap spot, this is where you want to have some saved up gold. You don't want to spend it on too much. Maybe gamble like 1 4 link so you're ready to swap over to Power Siphon. But outside of that, save your gold and use your gold to respec from here to here. The reason being is respecs are way cheaper at level 30 than they are at level 70. So you want to use your gold respecs early on and then save the more expensive respecs for later where you're going to use the respec passes you get from the campaign. Now, from this point onward, all the way up to level 49, this is about 19 passives worth of respecs that are going to be necessary to swap to the tree. You have a choice. You could either say, I'm going to get a little bit of extra regrets, or I'm going to use some of my gold to respec, and you could go for a bit more efficient leveling by going for like this tree here where you start grabbing some more mine nodes to make your experience throughout the campaign better. I would probably do this and just farm a few more regrets from Heist and get a little bit more gold respects type of thing, but it's up to you. So you could either go a bit more efficient throughout the campaign, or you could say, nah, I don't want to have to farm those regrets later on. I'm going to just play a bit less efficient throughout the campaign. And the other option is essentially from that point onward, you start speccing to all the nodes that are setting you up to do Penance Brand Anticipation. But all those nodes are things like brand nodes, Zealot's Oath, Spell Crit. There's stuff that isn't necessarily going to make you stronger in terms of your Power Siphon leveling. So that's up to you whether or not you want to go for a little bit more power through the campaign and then farm a few more regret orbs, which we'll talk about. That is your option. Ultimately, there is a couple nodes here that do give you damage like these nodes here, but the other nodes are not going to do it. Next, let's talk about Ascendancy points for the run. I believe far and away, Ghost of the Deep should be your first lab. Now, there are some contingencies to this Ascendancy. We know the Haunted Wand mod has a 10-second delay per each zone you enter to turn on. I hope and pray they do not include that terrible quality of life on this Ascendancy node. If they do, then we're going to have to go with a different node. But ideally, this is the node we get to click, and maybe, if we're really lucky, it pairs with Tricorn, with Fairgrave's Tricorn, and then we get the Giga Onslaught, but that's probably unlikely to happen. That just seemed like it would be too free. I'm just hoping it's a permanent buff that just works all the time, not necessarily one that has a 10-second delay to start on each zone, because if it has a 10-second delay to start on each zone, doesn't work great in Sanctum because you're clearing each zone in about 10 seconds anyways, so you wouldn't really necessarily want this, you'd want something else. So anyways, first lab, Ghost of the Deep, just go faster. It doesn't necessarily give you benefit in terms of your damage for Power Siphon, but it makes your mapping or your progression through the campaign so much faster. 30% movement speed, 30% attack speed, a little bit of damage, and then occasionally if you're casting a curse or something, it's just going to feel better, feel smoother. I would go with this. You could go Stormy Seas for the lightning damage conversion first and have your Power Siphons freezing, but personally, I would say Ghost of the Deep just is going to be the way to go. Now, some people have said, hey, but what if I want to use the cast speed while leveling? I think Power Siphon is so strong, even if you give a lot of the other options 30 cast speed, it still is going to be better to be Power Siphon, but you can make that choice for yourself. Power Siphon is just what I believe is strong, so I'm going to recommend it, but you might like some other leveling method. Use what you're comfortable with. This is just what I'm recommended. Ultimately, the important part is you need to get to level 70, you need to swap to the Penance Brand start, and that will get you ready to go into Sanctum. What you do before that is up to you. All right, first lab, Ghost of the Deep. Second lab, Stormy Seas for the lightning conversion. This is very good for a couple reasons. Number one is Freeze is powerful in Sanctum. It does make it easier. Freeze and Chill make the guards much less likely to hit you, and on top of that, you still get to keep shock, and on top of that, you get to double dip on situations where Let's say like this node has cold damage and lightning damage, both of those apply. This node says 25 lightning, 25 cold, both of those apply. So on your gearing, there's some very efficient things that just benefit multiple times, and that feels very good. Stuff like gain damage is extra, or gain non-damage, or gain elemental damage. You get multiple procs of that when you have conversion. Another great example, which I think would be great for the build, is something like a Barracks Grip, where it has cold damage and flat lightning dispels, and we benefit for both of those. The flat lightning gets converted to cold, and then I benefit from the cold damage. And then on top of that, we get to freeze and shock enemies, which gives us both life leech and ES leech, which is kind of a little neat. So the point is, when you have that conversion, you get some dual benefit in terms of where you can grab multiple sources of percent damage that you wouldn't normally be able to grab. Point number 3, the Merc Lab is going to be Glacial Wave. This gives us a little bit of tank where we hit enemies, we chill them, and they're going to deal like 15% less damage. Very nice little extra defense node. And then we get to also make enemies take 30% increased damage from the chill node on the Glacial Wave. So all these nodes are very high DPS, they're very focused on speed, and I think it's going to feel very good in Sanctum. After that, Uber Lab, I think Sea Legs makes sense. Once you start gearing more, you can start putting a bunch of extra, basically lightning res on your gear for crit chance. That's up to you if you want to go that route. That's what I would do personally. You could also go for the freeze node for a bit more defenses, or you could go for the reverse chill if you want to start forcing reverse chill in your Ascendancy to start going faster. Some notes, I should say, is Penance Brand of Dissipation only benefits from increases and reductions to cast speed for its activation rate. So action speed and the more cast speed from the fishing rod node, neither of those will apply to Penance Brand's Dissipation activation. It won't help your DPS. It'll just help how fast you place the brand down. So they're not necessarily like super big nodes you want to go for per se. All right, that goes over the Ascendancy and progression. Now let's talk a little bit about gearing. I have put together in my notes section a buy list right here. So what you end up doing is you want to highlight over like this, Control C, and this works for both Brave and Chrome, I believe is supported for this extension. And you'll see a list like this, but I'll show you how to import it. You click the import folder and you Control V that whole text, and you should see Surfcaster buy list 27 bookmarks. So I'm not going to add this because I already have it right here. But for context, this is just to make your league start easy. You just have your browser on like basically alt tabbed or on your second monitor or whatever. And let's say you get your first chaos, you could say, I want to make my run through the campaign faster. Boom, you click the thrill still thing, you grab yourself an onslaught helmet, and all of a sudden your campaign run gets a lot faster, a lot smoother. It's just meant to be a quick, like, okay, what's the next upgrade I could go for? I just got a couple chaos. You can pop it into your search, and it's to keep your downtime low, along with giving you an idea of upgrades to go for throughout the run. Pretty much, this is going to lead you towards this basic gear set I have here. There's a lot of uniques. Full disclosure, certain uniques could be rares. This is just... Uniques are just super easy and cheap and generally pretty good for the power, but rares can be good as well. I'll give you an example. A rare is going to beat Singularity without too much effort. In the showcase I will do today, I will show a pretty bad rare, not necessarily Singularity. Singularity is a bit better than what I'm going to showcase, but it'll give you an example. Next up, things like Rise of Phoenix. This, again, could be just a rare shield with +1 fizz. This could be a Ghastly Theater for more of a fizz max hit. That's just kind of up to you, but these are the things just giving you a general picture. That being said, there are uniques that I really wouldn't negotiate with because, number one, they're very common and they're very strong for the price point. An example is Khaleesi's Grace. This gives you a 5 link for basically 1 chaos. I think this is like a T5. I have never really had any issues getting this on a league start. It's usually anywhere from 1 to 5 chaos. Very, very affordable. Get you a 5 link early. Can recommend. Another example is Vol's Protector. It's a low-level item. It's a T3, so it's a bit more rare, probably the most rare unique in this entire list, but ultimately not many people use it because it's relatively niche. But for our character, it gives us Power Charge on crit, and it gives us Inner Conviction, which is a damage multiplier, and it just makes our DPS nice early on. As I was saying, for Vol Protector, it's mostly a DPS option. If this is too expensive on League Serve, like for whatever reason, there's enough people that are all trying to get this one item, I don't think that's very likely. But if it is, you can work around this. Just grab a Ball Lightning and put Unleash and Power Charge on crit on it. There should be enough suffixes. There should be enough sockets available for you to do that. Just drop the Stone Golem. I'm not that attached to it anyways. And you can use that to generate power charges, as well as you can get quality on your Assassin's Mark, which will give you power charges during boss fights as well if you don't want to cast Ball Lightning. So this is something great for damage. Not 100% necessary. You can do other options for it. But this is what I recommend. Should be a cheap unique that allows you to get nice power charges on crit, a little bit of extra damage, and it should feel pretty good. After that, March of the Legion, Again, another very common T5 unique, shouldn't be too much of an issue. Doesn't really matter what the role is on this. The only thing we really care about is just getting that level 25 Divine Blessing for our Hatred skill. Ultimately, this could be replaced with a rare because you can just grab a Divine Blessing support and then you put that link to more duration onto your Hatred, and you're just using that for essentially just another free, not free aura, but aura that's relatively easy to proc in your build for extra damage. So none of these things are mandatory by any extent, but they're just some nice placeholder items to recommend, as well as in the buy list, we also have searches for rares. For example, rare belt, rare ring, rare amulet. All of these searches are weighted sums with stats that are fairly decent for the build, and you just adjust this weighting based on how good of an item you want to find. Essentially, I try to keep most of the weightings that are relatively like not that strong, but you can probably get better items. What I'd recommend is you hit the search button, see how many listings show up. If there's a ton of listings and they're all pretty cheap, you can either click the sum to get a whatever shows you the highest value, which this is showing Marilyn's fallacy, which isn't exactly correct because it doesn't take into account the less crit chance. Late game, you can technically do something like this if you really are over invested into power charges, but I wouldn't recommend this early game. The important thing is getting probably a rare amulet and adjust the weight up as you want to make upgrades to your items. So we have some rare item searches for that purpose. And on top of that, in case you want to take this character into the late game, like you want to just keep going all the way through red sanctums and just destroying content and you will get more and more damage, there is the obvious setup that gets fairly expensive because of one item, Ralakesh, but it's very, very, very strong charge stacking. You've seen it a gajillion times. It's basically you grab Ralakesh boots, you stack max power charge to the moon, you grab a badge of the Brotherhood, which gives you max frenzies, and then you put on the Maven belt, which gives you the ability to generate absorption charges, which helps you sustain your ES pool, and you just get a lot of free damage from it. And that's like Malachai's Loop, Ralakesh Impatience, Badge of the Brotherhood, Restless Ward, Militant Faith. These are the classic, in my opinion, go-to items for a Sanctum rushing style build, and as you get more currency and you want to buy yourself some upgrades, these are the options I would go to. We also have things like Taming, Void Battery for DPS, as well as the stuff earlier on the list is the cheap stuff that's just to get you started. So hopefully that makes some sense for the buy list. Now, you're probably wondering, Lance, how do we get the currency to buy all these initial 1C, 2C uniques? It's pretty straightforward. What's going to happen is you're going to get to roughly around Act 9. You're going to be around the level of like 58 to 60-ish. And what I would recommend you do, you should have picked up some rogue markers or some of those heist chests as you're going through the campaign. What you do is every time you level, you will go to the rogue harbor and you will talk to the vendor right over here, Wakano, and say purchase items. He gives a list of contracts. What you want to buy is a demolition contract. You'll see right here, demolition, and you see demolition. So you'll be buying these, and you also want to buy lockpicking. And there's no lockpicking here in the search, or I typoed it, whatever it is. What you're going to do is you're going to run in these demolition contracts, and you're going to look for the question mark chests, as well as whatever extra threshold you have to grab little chests on the way. And the idea here is we're farming for chaos. The question mark chest pieces in Heist very consistently give chaos orbs. We'll see. We have 2 question mark chest pieces. We'll see if we can give an example of it right here. Normally at this point, you're going to be running around with Power Siphon. You should be a little bit tankier than our current character, but I'm showcasing it with this setup right now because this is the setup I'm going to showcase for doing the actual heist. So we'll open this question mark chest piece just to showcase that it does give chaos on a very regular basis. I think most time you at least get 1. Sometimes you get 2 or 3 on chaos orbs. This is a 4 chaos orb. Okay, I don't see that too often, but pretty much every time you're getting 1 to 2 chaos, sometimes 3, or I guess in this example, sometimes 4. That's the question mark chest pieces. You get really fast chaos. Technically, while you're doing this, you can also get side chest pieces for jewelry, rare items, and you can do chaos recipe. I don't usually do that myself, but you can do it if you want to get a little bit of extra chaos that way. And then lockpicking has the currency chest pieces, which also give chaos orbs, and it has jewelry. You'll see the jewelry rooms, and that's if you want to do chaos recipe, or you just want to ID some rares and hopefully you hit a good one that you can resell. That is up to you. But basically, every time you level, this vendor, Wakano, resets and he'll have more contracts. So basically, as you're going through the campaign, as you're going through those zones, every time you ding a level, go over to here, find some contracts for demolition and lockpicking, and run them for chaos orbs. This should be an easy way to get about 10 to 20 chaos to get you your initial set of gear. That way you can start the run. Speaking of the initial set of gear, you're going to be asking, I know you probably already saw it, you're going to say, Lance, why are you showcasing us a build with Yoke of Suffering? And why do you have Call of the Brotherhoods and all this and that? Well, we are showcasing a setup that is simulating the Surfcaster Ascendancy. With this character, I have no Ascendancy, and if you look at the Surfcaster Ascendancy, it gets a few important things. It gets Ghost of the Deep, which has cast speed, movement speed, and attack speed, and percent damage. I didn't have a setup or enough ways to simulate the attack speed and movement speed, so technically this character is moving 30% slower than it would with the movement speed, and our attack speed for our leap slam would also be faster. So just keep in mind how fast we're moving. You will have a 1.5 times onslaught on top of this with Ghost of the Deep, and you will be faster. As for the element or the cold damage can shock node, that's part of the reason we're clicking Yoke of Suffering. Yoke of Suffering says elemental damage can shock, which means our cold damage will shock. Also, Badge of the or Call of the Brotherhood is the way you convert lightning to cold damage, and that Ascendancy comes with 100% conversion. So I'm forced into wearing 2 of these with Yoke of Suffering to simulate the lightning to cold and the cold damage being able to shock. And then on top of that, you will notice Yoke of Suffering has a node that says enemies take increased damage for each ailment on them. We are able to inflict chill, freeze, and shock. That's 3 ailments, about 30% increased damage taken. And that is simulating the next node, which is Glacial Wave, which makes enemies take 30% increased damage if we inflict a 30% chill on them. So that is why I'm wearing these 3 items. Unfortunately, the downside is we can't use rares, or some of the unique options we'd have like Barracks Grip. So it's not a perfect test. I think we are ultimately a bit weaker than we will be on the actual league start, especially in terms of speed, because we're missing 30% movement speed and 30% attack speed. But I did simulate the cast speed using jewels. So on this, you'll notice we have a lot of jewel sockets here with cast speed and some res. This is because we are wearing these items, which don't really give us much res, as well as the fact we are not going to be killing Kitava on league launch to have another 30 all res. Speaking of, you'll notice on this character we have a Light of Meaning. This is just to simulate the 30 chaos res. Roughly, we would have more than we currently have. I guess, okay, maybe this is giving me more chaos res than I thought it was. Okay, that's a bit better than it should be. We should probably be at roughly negative 30 if we use a Lori's Lantern, be it at basically base 0 res. So this is a bit more res. I thought it was only giving me I think it was only giving me 30 res, but I think I swapped some nodes around. I grabbed some more nodes in the radius when I was setting up the test for this. So that's probably a bit better than it should be. But even then, we should still be fine for chaos damage with our life pool and our petrified blood. But anyways, that's why I have that. The other thing you'll notice is we have mana regen nodes along with some cast speed nodes. These are simulating the 30% cast speed, as well as they're simulating the 20% damage right here. This is the 20% damage. And then there was one other thing I had. I think that's mostly it. Simulating the cast speed, simulating the res, and yeah, that's about it. So that's what the extra passives are for. You'll notice we have a 97 character. That gives us about an extra, I think it's 6 life per level. So we have about 120, 150-ish extra life than we would normally have at this point. But I would argue when you actually play the run, you can do rare rings, you can do barracks, you can add in some extra life to simulate or counterbalance that. Lori's Lantern, unlucky damage, gives you a bit of extra EHP because enemies are going to be hitting you for less. Stuff like that should make up for that, and hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're trying to do with the simulation here on simulating the run. As for the total passives, what level is this character simulating? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I missed something here because it should be about 26 passives I have on this tree. I think I missed counting at some point. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Okay, 26 passives that are basically us simulating the Ascendancy for Ghost of the Deep and the other stuff. And then we have, I guess, 2 extra passives, which makes this character roughly around level 69, but then you don't have Kitava killed, which makes it roughly around a 71 character. That should be the baseline of about this is. And then I have the POB set up for a 69 tree that should work fine. Now let's go ahead and showcase what this character looks like on doing an actual Sanctum and what the content looks like. We have on our skill gems, Leap Slam for movement. We have a Frostblink for movement. We have Petrified Blood and Haste. Petrified Blood is to make it so when we're forcing in low life, our character still has a decent EHP. I had a lot of people recommending me or telling me to look at a Kua POB, and what I saw was a character that I think is just too squishy. If you're very good and you absolutely never get hit, I think it's fine. but its max hit, I think, was just a bit too low. I think your max hit needs to be at least around 3k for early Sanctums to not get one shot by most mechanics. And then you have the dodgeable mechanics that would one-shot you, but are very easy to dodge. You can play how you want. If you want to play more ZHP, that's up to you, but I think you're running the risk of randomly just dying throughout the Sanctum run. That is your call. So anyways, we have 1k Petrified Lifeblood pool plus 700 ES on top of Mind Over Matter. And then we have good regen from Rise of the Phoenix and this belt here on top of Zealot's Oath. And my thought process behind this was we could go Leech or we could go Zealot's Oath and then have Life Flask for a life pool because these sustain very well, which I noticed when I've done Sanctum runs and that felt good to me. Or we could have 1 point Leech, which is less sustain ES and a little bit less consistent. I'd rather have the regen. You could also do Ghostly Theater for a max hit pool as well. So anyways, then we have our Penance brand, which is a level 18. What I'd recommend is I would do either a lab or 2 of Merc Lab, or you might only need 1 Merc Lab where you get a good XP altar. This, I think you should at least get to around level 18. You can get there with easily like 1 or 2 XP altars on Merc Lab. And then every other gem we have on this should be around level 16, level 17, which is about the XP range of your skill gems when you're a level 70 character, whenever you run through the campaign. I did that for pretty much everything. The only thing I have that is not correct, I believe, is this Assassin Mark has quality on it, which gives chance to gain power charge. You get your power charges from Vol's Protector anyways, so I didn't think that mattered too much, but it's a level 16 gem, and that should be the case for pretty much everything else here. One thing I don't think you necessarily need is Stone Golem. I have it here. It gives a bit of extra regen. You can also do an Animate Guardian if you want for a bit of extra damage. I'm not sure how good their survivability is, but we have extra gem sockets to work with. You can kind of play around with how you will. So now let's go into Sanctum to showcase what this looks like. Our character, the way it starts, every room when we start the room, we click Hatred right here, which is giving us our Hatred aura. Lasts 16 seconds. That should last you for pretty much the whole room, but if you need to reapply it, it's going to be a very fast cast time with how much cast speed, and the regen should feel very good where the ES comes back right away, and it's not an issue. All right, I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like for a couple of rooms, and we'll do the boss fight just to show you what the damage looks like on the character for this level of Sanctum. We are simulating a level 71, I think, roughly with the setup, and this is about what you would be when you're entering Sanctum. So you cast our Hatred, and then basically wherever you see guards, you kind of just preload them. You will freeze the enemies due to the cold damage, and you can just basically jump around. It should be a fairly easy Sanctum run. It shouldn't require you to do too much. Obviously, if you misplay a little bit like I did and jump in a laser, you'll take some resolve damage, but that's more of a skill issue than anything else. But you can always click this, refill your resolve, not a big deal. And then we'll go, I always think whenever you're running Sanctums, make money the priority. Always prioritize currency. Unless you're having a really bricked run where you have bad afflictions, then maybe you might need to prioritize something like a, let's say a, Radiant Fountain or something that's going to just make your run a lot easier. That is just something where you have to play it by how the run's going. Ultimately, as you can see, this character is moving pretty fast. Now picture it with 30% additional movement speed and 30% additional attack speed, and it'll move that much faster. Regrets or fusings? Fusings are probably worth more. I'm not too sure. Let's go ahead and fight this boss. And then we're going to talk about the ASA. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but I'll tell you about something funny. But this is what it looks like for doing a boss. Should be relatively high damage. This is no boons, and that should look like what most of your boss fights for the run. You put the brands down, you put Assassin's Mark down, you do your Hatred Aura, and you walk in a circle. Should be a relatively straightforward thing. Again, don't recommend doing this strategy unless you are familiar or have done Sanctum before, but it should make it relatively easy. I will say this character will be faster than the Energy Blade character. It does more damage initially, and I think it does less damage late game. Well, it depends if you get the good charge gear. The main difference is it's a bit squishier. It's definitely on the squishier side compared to the Energy Blade character, so you need to play a bit more. Carefully. That's the main difference. So, anyways, that is the in-game showcase. As for the ASA, I'm just gonna talk about this real briefly because I think it's funny. There is a post that went on Reddit and a bunch of people have been talking about, which is right here. This is Snap. He's saying, I have 176 people signed up for the ASA, or otherwise known as the Anti-Sanctum Alliance, where we buy and immediately delete every tome that shows up on the market. This is funny for a few reasons, and also, I think, doomed for ultimate failure. And this is an act of war, okay? They're challenging us, the Sanctum Rushers, and I think we should form a counter group called the Sanctum Rushers United, the SRU. Somebody in my chat came up with that. It sounded pretty good to me. And we should fight back against these group MF players that think they can bully us. Number one, there's a few problems with this. you'd have to get literally everyone on the server to agree to screw themselves by not selling their tomes. This is what your stash looks like when you're a Sanctum runner. This is what it looks like if you are a non-Sanctum runner, just for context. This is what your stash looks like on a league start. If you dropped a Forbidden Tome and you have no money, that Forbidden Tome on league start will sell anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30 chaos, especially if a lot of people aren't competing with you on the market. You can sell it for a bit more. The thing is, it's never going to sell for a divine, because on average, Sanctum runs early give you about a divine in currency, and no one's going to spend 20 to 30 minutes doing a run that may or may not even break even. Also, they're very common. So the point is, if everyone agrees to do this, well, that's just not going to happen. Not everyone's going to agree to do it. So people are still going to sell the tomes, and you're just going to be shooting yourself in the foot, because you're not going to make money when you could be selling a tome and get 30C and instantly make a ton of massive upgrades to your own character. Another thing I want to note that's funny about this is the people that are trying to start this movement are Snap and Empy's group. They are literally the definition of the bourgeoisie, the top 1% of 1%. Do you really want an alliance with the Richies? I think the Sanctum runners, we should counter this by hitting them where it hurts. And hitting them where it hurts is hitting their scarabs. They need Pandemonium and they need Glittering. They are a group dedicated to flooding the market with a bunch of uniques, so that way, if you find a good unique, it's not worth anything because they already dropped hundreds of them. So what I would recommend, as Sanctum runners that want to fight back against this tyranny, this assault against our righteousness of fighting to drive the divine prices lower in the market, is we should invest into and buy up horned scarabs of Glittering and Pandemonium, because these scarabs are essential to the strategies they're trying to run in order to fight back. I think it'd be kind of funny. So I put this on the buy list for these scarabs. Most likely, they are going to value these things much more than we're going to value tomes, because tomes are really common and these scarabs are really rare. It is much easier to do a market movement against something like these than it is to force a market movement against tomes. I just want to talk about it because I think it's funny. I think it's a little bit silly, and they're fighting a losing battle. If you're trying to price fix tomes or buy all the tomes off the market, you got to realize that if you're a group MF player, you have a much greater weakness, because the thing contingent on your strategy is much, much rarer and much more easily purchased, as well as it actually holds the value. You purchase that, the value of a group party doing a very juiced map is way more valuable for that specific scarab than one Sanctum is for the average value you get back, average return you get back from one Sanctum. So these could be a good investment for Sanctum runners. You got a little extra cash, buy some horned scarabs of Pandemonium and Glittering, would be kind of funny. Anyways, full disclosure, I don't know if I said this yet or not yet. I am not starting this build. I made this build because people wanted me to. They're asking for a Sanctum Rusher, and if I was going to, this is what I would do. I am very excited about playing a Val Cold Snap build, which is what I'm actually going to play, but I took the time, I took the day to test out a strategy that I'm fairly confident in, and I think you guys will have a lot of fun with, as well as putting this leveling PUB together. And so, do with it what you will. If you're trying to Sanctum Rush, I think this would be the play. Ultimately, there's a few Ascendancies that can do Sanctum Rush. Why I went with Surfcaster is I think it's just faster to get to there. It's a faster transition, and you're just going to farm currency faster. The main reason for a Sanctum League start is to build up currency, to make a cool character, and I think this just does it very efficiently. I would say late game, something like a Scion might be stronger, but this gets you there faster than ever. I'm going to lube the market so hard. I don't know why. Anyways, going D&D. Anyways, this is a look at the Surfcaster Penance brand anticipation. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you're Sanctum rushing, I hope you find this useful. And next video will be on my Val Cold Snap plans for the event league start. So anyways, take care, Exiles. As always, thanks for watching, and peace out. Have a good one.